Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climb. I'm your host, Adrian Branch, a former NBA world champion and ESPN analyst. And this show is all about celebrating people who overcome, how they overcome potholes and obstacles, setbacks to success. Think about it. We all have mountains to face in life to climb. That's why we call ourselves the climbers. And because the climb focuses on real conversations with real people in real life, we are excited to bring you the best of the best. And today, our guest is someone who actually I've been trying to get on for one full year, folks. And this gentleman is a retired Major General, Cedric Wins. He's been a Division I basketball player. He's been a leader on many fronts. And when you hear him talk, I've got my pen and my paper ready to listen to him. So, welcome to the show, sir. Excited to see you.
Adrian, my friend, good to see you.
Well, first of all,
Thank you for having me.
thank you for your service. Thank you for who you are and your representation. You have had a lot of firsts, and we'll talk about that. But before you were a celebrated officer, before you were recognized in the military for what you were doing, take us back before you were Cedric Wins, celebrated athlete and soldier.
Sure. Cedric Wins was just kind of an ordinary kid. Grew up in a military family. My dad had served in three conflicts: the end of World War II, the Korean War, and towards the tail end of his career, the Vietnam War. And I was born in 1963. When he retired from the military, he moved the family up to the Washington, D.C. area, what's now called the DMV. Um, if I had to characterize myself, I would say number one, I was a very competitive young boy, always liked to have fun, was a little bit mischievous, didn't, although I had a great foundation in discipline and the steerage of two great parents, I was like a lot of other kids. I was prone to doing some things that probably were ill advised, but it was probably because of the frontal lobe just not having fully developed at that particular time. Uh, I met you, of course, at DeMatha High School. You were a well known entity there. I was not. I came to DeMatha because a good friend of mine, his cousin had played at DeMatha and was all Met, perhaps
Wow.
all American, the Satterthwaite guys.
Oh, okay. Now that family, that's a DeMatha
Lonnie
family.
Satterthwaite and
Yes.
Aaron
Back
Satterthwaite.
in the 70s, I think.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And I met them one time. I think Ronnie was down at William and Mary playing, and Aaron, I think he'd gone up to one of the Ivy League schools to play football. And I was just so captured by meeting those guys that something kind of lit a fire in me when it came to playing basketball. And I, at that particular point, decided I was all in. I was going to go all in for basketball and just see where it could take me. And so rather than to go to the public high school, my parents had decided, they were going to bite the bullet financially and send me to private school. And I was able to get into DeMatha, and that's how I ended up at DeMatha. And of course, um, one very unique aspect about DeMatha that I learned early on, and you reflect on these things now, is DeMatha was an exceptional school for producing winners. If you didn't learn anything else at DeMatha, and you learned a lot at DeMatha, you learned how to be a winner. And so, needless to say, we played on the same freshman team. We were undefeated. You were the star player, one of the five starters. I and our other good friend Kelvin Johnson, we always debate this. I think I was 15th or 16th man. He wants to argue that he was 15th, 16th man. But be that as it may, we were we were on this undefeated team.
Yeah, 24-0. Now,
Yeah,
I'm going to brag on you. I'm going to brag for our listeners. The general's being very, very generous because he was a Division One player. Right before we came on, I said, I always thought you were 6'5". He said, I'm 6'3", but a 1,400 points career score, all conference at VMI, and then all conference again as a rookie, and then all conference his senior year. But go back to this, because there was a time you retired after 34 years of military service, but there was a time when
yeah,
Navy came calling your junior year, our junior year, and you said, no, I don't want to go to Navy. And then almost the same thing with
yeah,
VMI. Tell us about that when you were a
yeah,
junior in high school.
yeah. Sure. So I'm a junior in high school. I've been cut from DeMatha, the varsity, and I decided that I was going to transfer because, again, being not being on the team was not going to allow me to fulfill my dreams and my pursuits. So I ended up going to a public high school. That team was a very good team, stacked with a lot of talent.
Vernon
I
Butler?
made Yeah, Vernon Butler came in during my senior year. So it was in my senior year where schools now have had an opportunity to see me. I was thankful that I got an opportunity to go to the world renowned 5-star camp during that year, that summer before my senior year. And so I got some exposure there. And then during the early part of the season, the coaches from the United States Naval Academy, who had already the previous year recruited and landed one of my teammates to go to Navy, came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come to the United States Naval Academy." And again, you and I have talked about this story, and I'm thinking, I'm just a young dumb kid, right? I don't have a clue of how prestigious it is to get an offer to go to the United States Naval Academy back then when I'm, 16, approaching 17 years old. And so I thought about it. I thought about the things that I had in my mind in terms of my dreams and my goals at the time. And I didn't see going to the Naval Academy and signing up for a commitment of 4 or 5 years in the United States Navy as being what I was, wanting to do, and so I turned down going to the Naval
And
Academy,
playing
you
with
know?
Dave
I
Robinson, because that would have been the same time. That would have been the same time
Exactly
2
right,
years later.
exactly right. David Robinson and my teammate Vernon Butler,
Vernon
right,
Butler.
who in his senior year at our high school, they won the state championship.
Yeah, at High Point, beat Lynn Bias, beat our teammate
Exactly
Lynn Bias.
right.
Now, let me go back to this. So VMI stayed with it. They stayed with it. They wanted you to come. But in your mindset, you were like, I still, even though your dad was a military guy, he was a U.S. Marshal, he was a D.C. police officer.
Oh,
So you were trained
yeah,
under discipline, but you said, this still
yeah,
is not for me. So tell us about when you got there in your
yeah,
3 years, you were a Division One
yeah,
player, but you almost really weren't interested in
yeah,
anything after that in the military.
right, right. So, my dream school, and I talk to young people about this when I talk to them now. My dream school was to go to the University of Maryland, right? It
Let's
was right down the
go.
street,
That's right. Come on.
right? But Maryland wasn't recruiting me. VMI had seen me play at camp. Um, I was watching all of my peers go off to play at the Division One level. Like I said, I was a very competitive guy. And so I'm thinking that I want to demonstrate my talents at the same level of all of my peers. And so after I turned down the Naval Academy, there were like two other schools that were really actively recruiting me. Right. And as well as I do kind of how the whole recruiting game operates. But it boiled down to 2 schools, and one was just firmly in my corner to say, "We want you to go there," and that was VMI. And so I didn't know anything about the conference that they played in per se, the Southern Conference. But when the coaches came and they gave me their recruiting pitch and they started naming all the other teams, particularly in the state of Virginia, that we were going to play against, I got excited. I mean, we were playing during my time at VMI. You know, we played teams like Virginia Tech, we played James Madison, we played William and Mary, we played Old Dominion, we played the University of Richmond. So we played all the schools in Virginia, played Longwood College, and every one of those teams that I named,
Had a pro.
you can probably pick out at least one guy on every one of those teams that ended up being a pro player
Dale Curry,
during that time.
Virginia Tech, Mark West,
Exactly.
Old Dominion, Richmond. You had from New York Knicks, the small
That's
forward
right.
Newman. So,
That's
but
we opened up against UVA in our brand new arena when they were the number one ranked team in the nation.
all right, I'm gonna stop you there. I'm gonna stop you there because you had a lot of firsts. You had a lot of
Uh-huh.
firsts. Where
Yeah.
were you, 1982, in that arena? What happened? What happened in that arena?
Well, so it was a
Historic.
brand new arena. It was a brand new arena, and one of the recruiting pitches was that you're going to play in this brand new arena that was built off the back of the success of our teams in the late 70s that had gone, and they were the early versions of Cinderella when VMI with Ron, the great Ron Carter, and Dave Montgomery and John
Yes.
Krovic, all those guys ended up going very deep into the NCAA tournament. So I opened up the arena that they helped build. And we were playing against UVA. And my claim to fame that I think you're referring to
Come on.
is scored the first buckets in that arena, which is a record that will always stand, thankfully.
Hey, said I'm a join you because we were classmates. You know,
Yeah,
all the legal beagles, all the admin folks have a stat on everything. Here's something for you. Because when I heard
yeah.
that, I said, okay, I'm gonna keep it to myself, but I'm gonna tell Sid. Said, guess who's the all-time leading scorer at Cole Fieldhouse? Uncle A.
You.
Uncle A.
Okay.
I had no
Okay.
idea. Come on, man. That was
Uh-huh.
1966 Glory Roads. That's where they played.
Right.
Janis
Sure.
Joplin
Sure.
had her last concert in 1970.
Sure.
So for you
That's
and I
right.
to have a historic moment for all the great players that were played there, I kind of chuckled to myself. I'm going to move
Uh-huh.
this along a little bit and say,
Okay.
you always say that VMI chose you. You didn't choose them because by your
Right.
junior year, first of all, your junior year in high school, you said no to the Naval Academy. Then your junior year in college, when you start to receive little stipends for being paid in government social work, then what was it? The Air Force turned you down, Air Force artillery, and they flagged
Yeah.
you because they said you weren't in shape. And that's one thing you were always were in shape. So tell us about that story where your road continued to shrink up and follow the Army path.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this all goes back to defining, your life's experiences and how it defines you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, um, as I was entering my junior year at VMI, I wasn't sold on the idea of service to our nation. I wasn't quite sold on it. Now, we had what was called mandatory commissioning back then at VMI, which essentially meant that if you were offered a commission, you were going to accept it. And my path at that time was, well, I'll go into the reserves. Right. And so reserves simply means that you're kind of a weekend warrior unless a conflict were to emerge, and you're doing 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year to fulfill your commitment for however many years. But then there came a point in time where you have to sign that contract. And as I was approaching that time to sign that contract on how I was going to serve, I was offered the opportunity to do what was called become a United States Army Reserve officer on active duty. Okay. And the way it was sold to me then was if you come on active duty and you do 3 years on active duty or 4 years on active duty, then once you fulfill that commitment, you can resign your commission and you have no other further requirement. And so I thought about that for a while. And I said, that sounds pretty interesting. But the other thing was, after being at VMI for 3 years, I was in search of something that was akin to the camaraderie, the teamwork, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of winning that I had grown up with and had matured over my young life. And I was in search of that as I was getting closer to the point where I was going to graduate. What's going to be my future? And so I was excited about and wanted to find something that would resemble as closely as I could that experience. And you it probably wouldn't be lost on you that the essence of being in the military as a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, coast guardsman is about the closest thing that you're going to come to with being on a sports team in my view and in a lot of other people's views.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then there was a time, so you make that commitment and your train is on the tracks, you're moving up the ranks. But then you talk about a time as a young officer where you thought you really blew it, but there was a blessing in disguise where you had to learn to really garner or really guard the soldiers, the subordinates, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental. Tell us about that time in your young career.
Yeah, so I mean, you go into one of the fascinating things about going into the military, right? And this is not a knock on going into the civilian sector, right? But when you go into the military, right off the bat, they are going to put you in charge of some and going to hand you some enormous responsibility. Um, you're going to be put in charge of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment. You're going to be personally responsible for the maintenance, the upkeep, and the operational capability of this equipment. They're also going to put you directly in the control of the lives of young men and women to the tune of, and I've heard it said, one of our chiefs of staff used to do it. Every soldier, every military person typically has an insurance policy that is well worth $500,000 easily, right? Sometimes higher. But they're going to put 10 to 12 to 60 people under your charge in your very early career that you're going to be responsible for their lives. You're going to be responsible for their safety. You're going to be responsible for their well being. And so I, just like many other lieutenants, young junior officers in the military, was given that responsibility. And you're learning, right? But you're also doing and you're also being. And you've got to demonstrate all of those things. You've got to demonstrate competency. You've got to demonstrate a willingness to understand the importance of taking care of your people. And so, in that instance, in my early career, looking back on it, I have to say that I failed. We were about to do a major exercise. I was the executive officer for a battery, which is a unit, field artillery batteries is a unit about 60 to 70 people. We were about to go on this major exercise. We were going to deploy with a bunch of equipment, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment. And it was my responsibility to make sure that equipment was in the best possible condition. And it was during that time that I was made aware that heaters weren't working of our vehicles. And so we worked and worked and worked and tried to get those heaters operational. But there came a time where we then had to go and deploy that equipment. And when we deployed that equipment, those heaters weren't working. And I had not done anything further to try to ensure that my people had vehicles with working heaters in this particular section of our battery, our company
Uh-huh.
size unit.
That's right.
So we went out to good old cold Arkansas, and the temperatures dropped. And I never forget going into that shelter and watching those guys sitting around a heater, a little makeshift heater that they had brought to try to keep warm in that vehicle. And when I left out of that shelter, the thought occurred to me. It's like, hey, this is not right. You didn't do right by your people in this particular instance. And so that stuck with me and it stayed with me. And then thankfully, over the course of time, I came across other leaders who would talk about the importance of taking care of your people. And so that stuck with me. And so thankfully, I didn't repeat that again. And as I continued on with my service and I continued to advance in my career, that always stuck with me. And that was something I said, I'm never going to have a failure of that type again when it comes to taking care of people.
Well, history's proving you right because preparation meets opportunity. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. You knock out
That's right.
34 years, decorated, distinguished medal of honor, and then you get the call back to your alma mater. And this is the interesting thing. Now, this is not an ordinary call because a VMI, Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia, is well known, well established. You had historic figures like General George Marshall, the Marshall Plan, that really helped rebuild after World War II Europe to the tune of 13 billion, 13 banana, 13 billion. You get the call to come back to your prestigious university as the interim superintendent. And that's the modern day president of a university, like if it's University of Maryland. Where I'm going is you had to put out some fires because there were some big boy challenges. You had where you had assault allegations and you had racism allegations. And then you were the first African American, but it was a master class in leadership. How did you
Yeah.
pull it out and how did you right the ship?
Yeah. So I would tell you that everything before that period prepared me for the things that I had to deal with at VMI. You learn over the course of your career, particularly when you're in high functioning, high operating organizations like the United States military. You learn that there are certain steps that you got to take. At the time that I went down to VMI, there was a crisis. Um, there were things in the press about the school, and if you're a public college or any type of college, right, you want things that are talked about your institution to be positive, right? It has an effect on recruitment, it has an effect on retention, it has an effect on the quality of kids that you get to come to your university. And so you must have a sterling reputation. Well, at that particular time, there were things that were occurring that were tarnishing the reputation of VMI as an institute. And then there was also probably as significant or even more significant something that was going on, which was called the pandemic,
Oh, that's
right?
right. That's
So,
right. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
COVID-19.
That's right.
VMI is the type of college, right? We talk about our curricular activities, which are the things that occur in the classroom. But we also have what's called a curricular program, which is kind of the experiential learning. And that's where a lot of the things surrounding leadership occur, right? Things like parade, um, things like young men and women pulling guard duty, things like young men and women participating in what we have called military duty, which a lot of times is often physical activity, right? Leadership reaction courses, slides for life, those types of things that are very, very evident in military camps, posts, and stations. But it's also unique that a lot of this same type of training exists in the 6 senior military colleges that are established.
And name
So
those
there was a
6.
crisis.
Name those 6, General, for the average person who doesn't
Uh,
know that 6.
yeah, so the 6 senior military colleges are a different distinction than the Federal Service Academies. Federal Service Academies, Army, Navy, Air Force, um, the Merchant Marine Academy, the United States Coast Guard Academy. Those are the Federal Service Academies. Federally funded. They have a very large target of commissioning officers that they will produce each and every year for the United States military. Probably the next tier are what is referred to as senior military colleges. So you've got the Virginia Military Institute, you've got the Citadel, you've got the Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets, you've got Norwich University, which is a private college, but
Up
they are
north.
a military senior military college as well. Then you've got Texas A&M, and then you've got North Georgia. So those are the 6 senior military colleges. And second to the Federal Service Academies, they probably produce the highest number of commissioned officers through ROTC programs, right? Which many other colleges across the nation have ROTC programs, but they don't produce as many as the senior military colleges collectively.
Now, let me ask you this one because I thought this was beautiful. You came in and you went and adjusted the fundamentals, the mission, the vision, the values. And then I heard you have this classic statement. Oh my goodness, I had to write this down. Will you take an easy wrong or a hard right?
Right,
What is that one about? That was
right,
good.
right. Yeah, so I mean, what it fundamentally boiled down to was when I got down there, I wanted to look at the framework of the institute, the place that I'd spent my cadetship and had grown as a young leader, and I thought it had vaulted me into the direction that I ultimately ended up going and was fairly successful in, which was a military officer. And so I wanted to look at the culture and what had happened to the culture of the MI. I wanted to look at the climate of the school because a lot of things had changed from even my day, right? Back in my day, we were all male institution, all male. And then over the years, going back in 1997, yeah,
Mhm.
were our first women. So now it's a co-ed college. Okay, well, what's the climate of the co-ed college? Is it still kind of anchored towards the all-male mindset, or is it now more accepting of a diverse student body that includes women, that includes more minorities? And how is that mix interacting and operating, given what I'd been reading in the press about things related to racism and sexism and so on and so forth? So, and it quite frankly, Adrian, it is what any leader would do who has been trained to be a good leader. Go into your organization and assess the culture of the organization, right? Is the culture of the organization that of an organization that is about winning in however you define winning, right? And so you go in and you make that assessment. And and where things need to be changed, you make those changes. And where things are strong, you want to keep those fundamentals going. So that's what I did.
I want to ask you about core values. What are the non negotiables for you as a leader or for the leader that's listening to you out there?
Yeah. So for me, the core values are built around trust, right? You got to be a trusted individual as a part of a trusted organization, right? Um, you have to be, and in military parlance, we always talk about mission. You got to be mission focused, right? You got to know, what the mission is, what the end state is of that mission. How are you going to get it accomplished? How are you going to make sure you have adequate resources? How are you going to make sure that the people, the time, the talent, everything that you have can come together through a series of events to make whatever it is that you are set out to do a success? Um, I think the other thing I would tell you, and this is something that certainly I really got steeped in when I was at VMI, is just your character, right? Your character has to be built around integrity, right? People trust your word. Okay. They trust you're going to do what you say. VMI has an honor code, and that honor code was simply you don't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anyone who does. Okay. And that was all built around the character that people see in you and this fundamental belief of, hey, my integrity is the one thing that I own that I and only I can give away. And I'm not going to do that for anything or anybody, because I know I will never get it back if I lose a person's ability to trust my word, to trust my actions, and to trust when I tell them I'm going to do my best to deliver on something.
Yeah, I heard you talk to a group of cadets and say Warren Buffett one time said it takes 20 years to build a good reputation and it takes 2 minutes to tear it down. Now, let me ask you
Absolutely.
this one because integrity's high on the list. Trust, foundation of relationships. How about this one? And it'll almost sound like it's a cute or snarky kind of a statement, but it's not. What about listening? How important is it to listen?
Yeah. It's extremely important. You got to be a good listener, right? I had a good buddy of mine. He and I, we were young officers over in Korea, and I remember him telling me, he said he used to say, "Wins, you got two ears and one mouth, so that means you ought to listen twice as much as you talk." Um, and you know, i- if you're not a good listener, um, then you are going to miss out on a lot of the good ideas and insights and instincts of others. I've never been a part of an organization where I thought I was the smartest person in the room. I was the one that had all the ideas. I was never that kind of leader and have never been that type of leader. And so for me, and I watched this play out in watching other leaders, the ones that were masterful were the ones that were good listeners and the ones that could get everybody around the table and get something out of each and every one of those people. And the art of it is, there's going to be what we sometimes refer to as the spring butts, right? The kind of the type A person who they're going to give you their opinion in a heartbeat. But if you look around the room, the art of it is to find that one person who might not routinely say anything, might not routinely speak up. And can you draw something out of them? Because oftentimes when you do, you will find and hear something extremely profound and something extremely insightful from those people. So listening is fundamental as far as what I was taught and how I grew up.
That's true.
Uh, your ego can't be a part of this, right? You have to be confident to know that if you're a decision maker, you're going to be a decision maker whether you get input that agrees with your thinking or whether you get input that doesn't agree with your thinking, right? But you got to be willing to listen.
I celebrate you because you've always been even keel, just steady as a rock. You come in
Yeah.
and you have a fantastic run as the superintendent. They don't renew your contract, yet documentation beats conversation. And enrollment increased by over 65%, most ever. You guys had
Yep.
projects for what, over $300 million that were on the table, that you were attracting business. How did you, Cedric Wins, when no one was around, how did you have to practice what you preach and say, man, listen, that was a real gutterball move, but I'm going to hold on to my integrity and I'm going to practice what I preach as I speak to so many young students.
Yeah. Well, part of it is about the example that you want to set and you want to hold true to, right? The example of who you are. Um, the other part of it is having lived life's experiences where you've had setbacks, right? Uh, if I'm being honest, certainly that episode in my life was one of the toughest because I knew what I'd done. I knew the sweat equity that I had put into doing what was necessary to kind of turn that whole situation around from a place that was in crisis with the potential to collapse based on COVID and based on the negative publicity that was occurring and turning that thing around where the legislature of the state, the governor of the state were receptive to what we were trying to do to turn the program around such that our operational funding from the state almost doubled in 4 years. Uh, a, a precipitous decline in our applicant pool. Well, we were able to reverse that and get it to start heading back north where it needed to be, even amidst all of these challenges that are going on in higher education today with enrollment challenges and enrollment crises and stuff like that. Um, we were able to do things for our faculty, which was one of the things for our faculty and staff that I was really most proud about because when I got there, I'm talking to my staff, and I was always a person who wanted to be out and present. And I'm talking to my staff, and I'm learning, what it takes for kind of the average worker, the grounds person, the person who cleans the bathrooms, what it takes for them to live in a small little southern town like Lexington. And I'm learning that, we got people who are working for us and then leaving and going to a second job, right? And one of the things that I was most proud about was my ability to increase the salaries of all of our workforce such that people didn't have to do those things um, out of necessity because they were struggling just to make ends meet to be able to provide for their families. So um, the bottom line is, I just you 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 do the thing, you control the things that you can control, and everything else, you have to kind of let it go. A lot of times that's when your faith comes into place, right? You say, hey, look, this is beyond my control. So I'm going to have to turn it over to God, or I'm going to have to turn it over to something else because I've done all I can do. And there's no more that I can do. And whatever the outcome is, if one door closes, I'm certain that another door is going to open for me.
Before we let you go, I got one more scenario. So you guys don't know off the air. I'm always asking. I call him said. I call said. What about this scenario? What about this? Because history was one of my favorite subjects, and that's why I had to have the general on our show. All right, put your war hat, war college. I love that. Your war college hat on, your general hat. Um, your strengths are strategy, talent management, risk management, campaigns, and you had a workforce of over 24,000 that you were entrusted.
Sure.
Here's a scenario before we let you go. Here's a scenario. Your enemy is dug in and they have the high ground, and you've got to take their flag. And you and I grew up with Batman with the utility. Remember, he had the utility and he had the bat boomerang and the flashlight. What is the one winning quality you'd take up the mountain to win that battle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the scenario that I hear you painting is one where it sounds like the odds are against us, right? They've got the high ground.
They've got the high ground.
They may outnumber. Yeah, they may
And
outnumber
you got
us.
one
They
quality.
may be betraying. And what's the one quality? The one quality I would tell you, you got to have grit. You
What?
got to be determined that even against those odds, you and your people are going to prevail. And you've got to be able to convey that to your people that that's the type of leadership that you're going to demonstrate. And that's the type of leadership that you're counting on from each and every one of them. Grit is so important, particularly in today's society for young people. And when I talk about grit, what I'm talking about is kind of a never say die attitude. I'm not going to give up until I see myself succeed, or I get to the point where I say, there's no way that this is going to be achievable by me.
Right.
But I'm optimistic enough to believe that if I demonstrate the right type of grit, I can get to success.
Wow. That is so awesome. That's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm beaming with pride right here. I'm like, that's my guy. That's my guy. And before we let you go, General, what's one thing you'd encourage the listeners to keep climbing? What would you say to them?
Well, for young people, and I get passionate about young people because I've spent the better part of the last 5 6 years with young folks. I've been around them throughout my military career. I would tell you I've spoken to them. I'm going to do a graduation ceremony here in the next couple of days. I always tell them, number one, be inquisitive, right? Be inquisitive. Be someone who quenches for learning. Um, and then be a hard worker, right? Be a hard worker. Um, I learned early on because I wasn't as talented as some people that I had to work twice as hard. And I remember hearing a little radio segment. A guy used to come on the local radio station here, and I've kind of reframed it in my own language. But the way I describe to people is, I said, "Hey, look, you will always notice that there's very little traffic on the extra mile, right? There's always just a little bit of traffic on the extra mile. So you need to be one of those people that's going the extra mile. So be willing to work. And then I think that, you have to have some fundamental characteristics about you that are built on the right type of character, whether it's your faith, built around your family, built around your integrity. Have a set of core values that are the things that you won't sacrifice, you won't budge, you won't bend on in any circumstances. Those are the things that I would encourage people to think about and to become rooted in their very fiber as you continue to climb.
My goodness. You just talked about grit. You talked about integrity. Where can they find you? Where can we find you if we want to know to stay in touch with you?
Sure, sure. I'm on a lot of these platforms. Probably the one that I interact with folks the most, and simply because it's considered a professional platform, is LinkedIn. And so if you go and you look up my name, Cedric Wins or Cedric T Wins, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know what the handle is. But I'm typically on there the most, and I try to publish or post positive, only positive things that kind of get people thinking about how to have a positive impact either in their lives or in someone else's life.
And beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for joining the show today. You are fantastic. Retired Major General Cedric Wins. We've got to do this again. Thank you, teammate.
I appreciate it, and thank you for everything that you have accomplished. You've been a role model for peers and people who are younger to watch you climb and to watch the success that you've achieved. So I'm glad to know you.
Wow, thank you. My goodness, everybody, that is the general. Run that back again. He's dropped so many nuggets, so much wisdom, and you can learn just a simple conversation. You'd never know he was so decorated. But if you want to follow us, head on over to Adrian's social media at Adrian Branch Speaks. Download the Climb wherever podcasts are available. And remember, my climbers, remember, be encouraged and keep climbing. We'll see you next time, everybody. Hey climbers, did you enjoy the show today but want to learn more on how to climb in your career and personal life? Go to adrianbranchspeaks.com and check out our workshops for more detail. Taken from over 40 years of my professional experience, these workshops have helped countless people develop champion mindsets to thrive. So sign up today